Hey, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Late Night with the Borg, Murray State Week on Jackrabbit Illustrated. As always, Jackrabbit Illustrated's title sponsor is Kubota Dealers of South Dakota, with 10 different locations across the great state of South Dakota and a couple just over the border in Nebraska. There's always a Kubota dealer near you. Get yourself into some orange equipment with part sales and service. They've got everything you may need for your acreage, home, or ranch. They've got skid steers, side-by-sides, and everything in between. And I know that Matt and Chad love their BX series Kubota tractors, but of course, Late Night with Borg is brought to you by Jackrabbit Central. Jackrabbit Central has got 3 locations, one at the Dana J. Dykehouse Stadium that you could have been at today. They've got one that is the bookstore on campus, and then they have the location downtown as well as jackrabbitcentral.com. It should be a great day on Tuesday to take advantage of the Touchdown Tuesday deal. Fairly sure we max that out with a 50 burger tonight. So you'll get your biggest discount possible. So get there on Tuesday and get yourself the new swag to celebrate the 50 burger. But Borg, it was the way you expected it to go. I know they were able to move the ball a little bit for Murray, but when I watched, I actually finally watched the NDSU Murray game last night, and to be honest, that wasn't a huge surprise to me. They actually did move the ball on NDSU. They had 4 times they were in the red zone. They got goose egged in the red zone, but they were in the end zone 4 times, and you've got a kicker who can hit a 55-yarder clear by that much. I mean, granted, he had the wind at his back, but I mean, that thing looked like it had been good from 65. He crushed that ball twice.
Not to mention his coach iced him by calling a timeout right before it.
Right. Yeah, that was crazy.
And I like Jody Wright, but he made some interesting decisions in this game.
Yeah, so they moved the ball a little bit. Not a lot in the end of things. No. They had 236 yards. Jacks pile up 595 total yards of offense. Had 15 rushing first downs, 11 passing first downs. I mean, you score 50-some points. That's the way it's going to go. But it didn't come with a huge amount of turnovers like you would expect. There was the interception that pops to mind, but I don't think there was a whole lot beyond that. Mark goes 9 for 16 for 170 and a touchdown in one half. It's a solid half. It's on its way to being a 300-plus yard performance if they kept him in there, maybe even more once that Murray State defense really started to loosen up. So it was a solid deal there, but a couple of injury setbacks, and I wasn't able to watch the post-game presser and get any updates on these guys, but Chase Mason came up gimpy after a play and was pretty tender walking off the field, and then Graham Goring looked like he was on crutches on the sideline at some point. So that Orgrosky, man, he's coming on at the right time. Hopefully that hopefully that's not something that we have to worry about going forwards, but obviously it sounds like it might be something. But beyond that, I mean, kind of what you expected out of this game. Got to see a lot of the twos, got to see Chase Mason run the offense. I think that went pretty well overall. The twos defense did a good job, didn't allow any touchdowns, or points. So I don't think there's a whole lot you could complain about in this game. Personally, it went the way that I think you would have drawn it up as a Jacks fan. The crowd, I will agree with Jimmy, as was overheard by our cohort Chad Myros when he was down in line for the bathrooms and they were playing Tyler Merriam talking to Jimmy at halftime, that saying that the team can't allow the energy of the crowd to allow their energy to fall. And it's fair criticism. It was a dead crowd. It wasn't a sellout crowd by any means. And if the fan base, we want to have championship expectations out of the program, then it's completely fair for them to have expectations of us. No problem with that. I get it's Murray State. It wasn't that wound up of a game, but it was a really fun time. Fun game overall. And I don't know what you saw down on the sidelines that was much different from what I saw, because this game, you knew it was a mismatch going in, and it ended up being that way. And outside of that, there was there wasn't a whole lot to glean. You got to see the passing game maybe just get going a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, I'm kind of guess I'm a little surprised. I hadn't heard Jimmy made that comment about. Obviously, I was in the stadium, so I didn't hear the halftime interview. A little interested by that because obviously we've certainly had our fun a little bit with Indy SU fans, kind of talking about their boredom with things and their declining attendance of late. There's a little. I don't know. I mean, it was a nice day. How many days you can, but I don't know. I mean, there's just no but. I mean, after those last two games, I understand where Jimmy's coming from, and he kind of reiterated that. I was listening. I stayed for most of that game. I need to post that. By the way, if you can, I posted our links to our highlights, which are now online. I actually was able to get them up before our post game pod here, but I stayed long enough to get the first touchdowns from Woods and Ogroski, which I just was sitting in the press room in the Stiglmeyer Center. And every time they got down there, I'm like, well, I might as well go shoot this because I might get someone's first career touchdown. So worked out all right. But yeah, I mean, I understand where Jimmy's coming from, and I get that he has to say that. But after you come off those epic games, how do you keep that energy up? I think that's just human nature. And you knew you were going to win this. My keys to this game, everybody does a keys to the game thing on for every team. The keys to this game were basically wake up, get to the stadium, put your pads on, and to borrow a line from Deadpool, give maximum effort. I mean, that they weren't going to lose this game. They were going to have food poisoning, and I think even the third and second string guys probably could have won this game, as evidenced by the fact, like you said, that if evidenced by the fact, like you said, the second string didn't give up any points. So, I mean, I kind of feel for Murray State. They're certainly in a really rough spot. I read some stuff. I think the city's kind of comparable to Macomb. I mean, they've basically filled. I know, again, they've taken a lot of the league's taken a lot of criticism for admitting them. I'm not as critical of that. I don't. The people who are critical of that addition, I'm like, well, this isn't the FBS. Where are they going to pull people from? It's not like they're going to. This isn't like the SEC who can go poach from the Pac-12. They're not going to, especially in a league where you kind of have a mixture of teams from different conferences. Obviously, you've got Youngstown, who's from I can't remember what that's the MAC, I think, or something or other in other sports. You've got Summit League, actual Missouri Valley. It's not like they can go poach the Big Sky that easily, or they can go poach the Ohio Valley, or they're going to add, Horizon. There you go. Thanks, King. Thanks, man. I couldn't remember whether they were. Right. And that was for Murray State. It was mainly a basket, it was mainly to line up their programs together. Too cowardly to approach the Senate. But I mean, it's just where the locations are that you don't see. I mean, again, and we know where a lot of the criticism comes from. It's from up north. I just don't, they made a move. It is what it is. I hope they get better. I really do. You never know what's going to happen in 10 years. Nobody could have imagined when SDSU and NDSU moved into this conference that Western Illinois was going to become a doormat. They were a good 1AA program, and they became, they just lost funding. So you never know. But, SDSU, they did what they had to do.
That whole thing drives me bonkers that they just don't understand that this was when you don't have an all sports conference, you don't necessarily get to pick, oh, we want a good football school. The basketball conferences that are your main conference for all of your sports are going to make the decisions. And the Summit League owed the MVC, the Missouri Valley. They just did. After they let in UND and they let in USD. It was time to see, we scratched your back to help your conference be stable. It's your turn to scratch ours. There's nothing more complicated to it. And I will say at least from a coach perspective, they sound like they have the attitude that they want to compete. And you could see, I think, in this game, the capability. They killed themselves a lot.
Yeah.
Sometimes just with a bad holding penalty, just, you could tell they were a younger team. They just had that feel to them. And, it does feel like they want to push, but it's such a hard conference to climb out of the cellar when you're that far down.
Well, and it's one of those things too, and we said this for a long time with USD when they were struggling. It's not even that you have to. We're not asking them to climb out of the. Well, and I guess we kind of have to amend this now because you look at how bad the rest of the conference has gotten outside of the top three. But we said this with USD for the longest time. It's not so much that you have to ascend to the top level. It's just get good enough to be in that middle to where you're at least competing for a playoff berth. And now we're seeing with this conference that, my God, look at how bad Northern Iowa has fallen. I kind of think Southern Illinois this year is more a result of the injuries. I mean, when you're down to a fourth-string quarterback, I think they were going to be okay. I don't know if they would have been a world beater, but I think they would have been a 7-win team. Their number one guy, I think, was actually a transfer from Murray State, who had been pretty good the year before. So I don't really – SIU, I think, will be okay in the long run. I think they're on decent footing, but we know Northern Iowa's shaky. Illinois State's – I mean, some guys like Spack and Farley, they just – I wonder if they – obviously I know some of them are dealing with the financial stuff, but sometimes you stay too long in a place and you haven't won the big one, or you stagnate. Coaches are – the saying is coaches are hired to get fired. I kind of wonder if some of that is starting to happen a little bit with those guys. And I mean, to be fair, I'm picking on you and I a little bit. I've even heard that Farley is doing a heck of a lot more just to keep that program afloat. So, maybe this idea of, hey, maybe it's time for Farley to step aside is pretty far-fetched if he's the only guy keeping that thing afloat. But we know there's programs that are struggling. Youngstown's kind of in a weird place, it seems like. So maybe it wouldn't be that hard. And Jody Wright, I know he has some connections to FBS. They brought in a lot of transfers. It's going to take some time. I think one thing, you mentioned that, like, mistakes. I was a little critical of one thing I noticed. Like, I know the kicker had the booming leg, but there was a sequence where when they go for their second field goal, they get down there, it's 4th and 4 at the 17. Why don't you just go for that? You're already down, I think it was 28 or 21-6. I'm thinking, and Johansson, I mean, Jaden, he was a Sioux Falls alum. I mean, he's got some limitations. He threw for a lot of yards in Division II. They don't really air it out much with him now. Obviously, maybe they just don't have the tools. I mean, he was 14 of 18. He threw the one pick, runs around nicely. But he's had his moments. I mean, but it is what it is with them right now. But he'd thrown a nice pass to get down there. They moved the ball a little bit. I'm just like, you're going to lose this game. Why not just go for the gusto? How many of these Dakota? I mean, they were shut out 59-0 by USD at home. They basically were shut out by NDSU. They scored 2 field. I'm thinking to myself in that moment, I'm like, I'm not trying to sandbag. And I tweeted this. I'm not trying to sandbag. Why would you kick a field goal? And try to build some momentum. I mean, maybe your kicker's an NFL prospect, which his leg certainly was good enough. But then on the next series, they fake a punt at their own 44 and don't get it, and then give him 44 for. I'm just like, I'm done. I'm not. And I like Jody Wright. I talked a little. I talked a little bit with him during the Valley Media Day. Obviously, I'm kind of pulling for Jaden Johansson because he's a Sioux Falls kid, South Dakota prep. But yeah, so there's definitely some things there. And truthfully, I didn't think they were that bad. They were obviously had a rough year last year, but the time I saw them at the Dakota Dome, I wasn't like, they didn't look like they were that out of their depth. I thought for everything I'd heard going into the year, I'm like, they made a decent showing. As I said, the quarterback ended up transferring to SIU, so he was pretty good. But yeah, I guess that's the big question, Frederick. And to be fair, I have not heard Jimmy's post-game press conference. I listened to his remarks on radio. I haven't heard anything. I haven't seen, I haven't read Matt Zimmer's post-game recap yet. I'm not hearing anything. I initially I said knee when I mentioned it. I've heard it was since the ankle. I didn't have a good. Again, I was kind of in the student. I was in that Stiglmeyer Center by that, and I didn't really have a good look. I was kind of looking up at the jumbotron, so I couldn't tell what they were looking at. And I think they said it was the ankle on the radio, and I had some people telling me as much. But you hope it's nothing, because at that point when he went down, it was mid fourth quarter, early fourth quarter. It's like, okay, you could have probably just gone with John Bell at that point. And, I don't really like to get too in the weeds of how, because that's, the whole, when do you pull people is a tale as old as time. And that can be debated every time that a game starts to get out of hand. But
yep.
Yeah, I mean, tweaked ankle. I mean, ankles, we'll see. I mean, obviously, I think Miller's been dealing with that in Fargo. So,
with someone like Chase, I think ankle, with how the Jacks use him, an ankle is much more important than it is for Cam Miller. Not saying it's not hugely important for Cam, but I mean, Jacks use him for his legs.
They use Cam similarly too. I mean, if Cam doesn't have that mobility, we saw that when they played SIU. He looked very different. Now, he was much better the following week, and I think that allowed him to, in part, if he hadn't have had the mobility, if he had been limited the way he was at SIU against NDSU, I think that would have been a different story in the marker game. But he obviously was much better recovered. Now, I think the other thing that maybe helps you with Chase is you don't necessarily use him every single play. He's a situational guy. Cam's is more important. I agree. No.
I'm saying not for the team. I'm saying for that specific player, because right now Mason he runs the ball. Is what he does 90% of the time when he's on the field. And you're not going to all of a sudden put Mason in there and have him start drop back passing and sitting in the pocket. You have Mark Gronowski.
He does running. I mean, he runs routes. I mean, he's receive. I mean, they've been doing this kind of the what do we call him? What do we call Cordell Stewart back in the day? I can't remember what that was. I can't remember what his nickname was back when he was kind of when he first came in. He was kind of doing everything for the Steelers before they tried making him the quarterback. But yeah, I mean, maybe the nice part is with him that, like I said, with Cam, he's an every down guy. Right. You're probably aggravating that ankle more if it's tender or still bad. Yeah, Slash. There you go. Couldn't think of it. That was a cool nickname as hell too. It wasn't the X Factor. That was Dante Hall, but it was Slash because he did every other thing. But yeah, I mean, again, like you said, Jason says gadget player is kind of a good way to kind of say what is kind of another way to say it for maybe for Chase too. But Cam if his ankle's bad, he's out there every play, and especially now because what happened with Cole Payton, as much as we kind of made fun of the Cole Payton package over the year, he tore his labrum during the marker game on the one play he ran. So now they don't, they have their other backup is a guy who's, I think his name's Nathaniel Hayes. He hasn't really played much, so they can't go to Peyton. So, if the ankle were bad for every down player, you're constantly using it. With Chase, if you tweak it, unless you really hurt it, you're not in every single down. You can maybe ice it. You can, I think there's a better chance of resting that than, a better chance of keeping that fresh and not necessarily hurting it too badly if you're not in on every down. But yeah, I think the Goring one, did that happen during I saw him on the sideline, but I barely saw him playing, so I didn't notice that.
Mm-hmm. I don't remember it happening. But I'm going to double check and make sure that I'm being accurate on this. Go back through the thread.
I saw it. And I don't think they have any duplicate. I want to double check because I don't think they have a duplicate. They might have a duplicate number 12. Obviously, they have guys who wear the same numbers. I mean, shoot, you had Jason Freeman for a number of years wearing 11, and they still have a number 11. They have another number 11, Joe Allman now. So apparently they like having 11 wear linebacker too. No, there's no duplicate number 12 that I'm aware of or on the roster. So I saw Graham on the sideline. He looked okay. I don't know if something happened later. I didn't remember him doing anything in the game, which I kind of thought was. I mean, it was a Graham. It was a Griffin Wilde game. Have I watched MSU? Not really. I was keeping an eye on the Murray State. I don't know if you're talking about Murray State or Montana State.
Montana State he's talking about.
No, I have not seen much of Montana State. I've kind of just caught bits and pieces, but I haven't had a chance to watch a full. I was keeping an eye on it because it was getting interesting today at the Inferno. That game was tied in the second half. I will say the thing I've seen in the bits and pieces I've seen in Montana State, it seems like Malot's kind of settled in. Cross your fingers with that guy. He seems like he stays healthy because he seems to be finding other gear with them. They've got some good transfers in. Got a lot of offensive weapons, but I think, I don't know. You don't know about today. I mean, they've got two kind of cakewalk games. You thought they had two cakewalk games between this and I think next week's Sacramento State, who, contrary to all their FBS wants, is not very good this year. And then they have the two big ones to end their year at Davis and obviously the Brawl of the Wild of Montana. Maybe they got caught looking ahead. I don't know. But, well, in Eastern Washington, I mean, they've been actually playing a little better despite what their record says. But I think, like I said, maybe Montana State got caught looking ahead. I don't know. But, yeah, and well, if you get whooped by team whooping cough, that says a lot right there for Sacramento State this season. Yeah. But, I mean, that's not – I don't want to put too much in that. They could have got caught looking ahead, but that's maybe a bad sign for your defense. And that's always been a sticking point for whenever Montana State – late in these seasons, when we've seen them in the playoffs, inevitably it seems like their defense starts to wear down, especially when they go up against a Dakota school. So, we'll see. I mean, obviously right now they released that batch of midseason rankings, which is the only one we're going to get. They're the 2 seed, which is really all that matters. You want to be the 1 or the 2. And if it ended today, SDSU potentially would be going, if they won through, if chalk held, would be going out there for a semifinal. I mean, the Jackrabbit offense has been a little skittish, to put it mildly. I don't think you get that much out of today's game, other than to get right. I agree. I agree with Zach. I think a lot of people have been kind of overlooking this Davis game. I can't remember who Davis lost to, but yeah, a lot of people are like, "Oh, Montana State's going unbeaten." I'm like, that game in Davis could be a landmine for them.
They lost to Cal. That's it.
Okay, well there you go. I mean, yeah. So, especially because of the fact it's right in front of the Grizz game. I mean, the fact Davis is good will probably help them. The fact Davis is a 1-loss team probably will keep their attention, but anytime you're right ahead of the Grizz game, there's always that threat of, are they going to get caught looking ahead for Montana, especially after what Montana, there's always that possibility. So
Davis beat Idaho, Brian.
And I'm, by the way, I'm not ready to. I know Idaho's getting Idaho's got one of their quarterbacks back. I wouldn't dismiss Idaho. I wouldn't want to see. Let's just say if Idaho's on NDSU's side or Montana State's side, I would be a little leery of seeing that team in the playoffs if they've got a healthy quarterback. Because I mean, they were playing well, and then all of a sudden the injuries started to hit their quarterbacks. I still don't know if their defense is there, but if they have a healthy quarterback with Jason Eck, that's a team that I'd be a little scared of if I had to see them in the second round of the quarterfinals. So, they could be I think everybody's just assuming it's going to be, a Final Four of maybe NDSU, Montana State, SDSU, USD. Saying, watch out for Idaho if they get healthy.
Yeah, it'll be like was mentioned here, these last 3 weeks are going to be wild, and we're going to find out so much that we haven't found out this season. Mechanical the Blue Bloods points out that their QB came back last week, so he's going to be rolling by the postseason, which I absolutely agree with. Really helps him a lot. So really this week the outside of Montana State struggling with Eastern, the real interesting one was the Southern Conference, and then UND losing again on the road to Indiana State. Please, God, and what's going to kill me is they're so tough in the Alara Center for no reason whatsoever, is they're going to play SDSU tough. And they absolutely do not deserve to be ranked after you lose to Indiana State and Youngstown State. You shouldn't be ranked. But now, if SDSU has a tight game with them, it's going to look terrible. So thanks, Bubba. But, I mean, not that it's going to matter. In the end, I don't think that game's going to matter. Will it help SDSU if they're ranked? Sure, because you get a ranked win for the resume. But, man, I'll ask you this because everybody's been asking me this. Do you think Bubba is in the hot seat?
I kind of want to go on a rant.
Utah State also beat Central Arkansas, which was another Utah Tech. He means Utah Tech.
Okay, I'm like,
yeah,
I'm like that wouldn't be a shock to me if Utah, at FBS.
That was their he clarifies. Their that is Utah Tech's first win.
That's a horrible loss for Central.
In Central Arkansas.
You might have to get the rant clock ready. It'll be a quick one because I'm going to go off a little bit on you.
Get after
it. I got to be careful because obviously SDSU and USD are going out there the next 2 weeks. They can still make the playoffs. What the hell, UND? What? Why are you like this? Every damn year. Everyone. You are the redheaded stepchild of the Dakotas. I get that your hockey program is number one there. I worked there, for crying out loud. I worked there. I know that hockey is number one. I've known a few basketball coaches at all three of the other Dakota schools who've said, thank God we don't have a hockey program because it would kill our recruiting, and I'm sure it would kill our budgets. We'd lose a lot of money to it, and I'm sure the sentiment is similar for football. But God, how do you not win a road game? How? You can't tell me. I get NDSU is this almighty power. Great. You can't. How do you not look at what SDSU did? I mean, you were a national championship program in Division II. How do you not win a road game? This is pathetic. Bubba Schweigert's a decent coach. I mean, he's not a world beater, I don't think. This is pathetic. And it's been going on year after year after year after year. Nothing changes. How does nothing change? It's pathetic. You've had some unbelievable wins in your facility. You can go back to SDSU and the COVID year. You finally got over the hump last year against North Dakota State. Finally, and you almost beat them a couple of years ago. You've had good teams, and you fold like a cheap suit. How do you not see what SDSU has done, going from playoff team to playoff team that can advance to national championship team? Then how do you not look at what USD has done, now looking like they are a team that could win a national? You are the only one that is stuck in this morass. It's not a coincidence. And you just gave Bubba an extension when somebody asked me if he's on the hot seat. You just gave him an extension. And, something needs to change.
It's incredible.
It's not going to be the head coach because you just gave him an extension.
Unless they have a big booster pop up who decides they're sick of it. I mean, he's gonna stick around because the Eaton contracts is an FBS thing. That's not an FCS thing.
And I got news. You're right. I still expect these games to be We'll see. I don't know. It wouldn't shock me if SDSU goes up there and blows them out. It wouldn't shock me if USC goes up there and really wouldn't shock me if USC goes up there and blows them out, because if SDSU beats them, then there's nothing left to play for. Like if they lose next week, then, other than senior day, I mean, I guess maybe that, put it like this. It wouldn't shock me if both of those games are really close. It wouldn't shock me if they win one of the two or both of them. But you know what will happen if they win both? They'll crap the bed at Illinois State and lose a road game, because it's what they do. They suck on the road. Yep. That is the sign of a program that is just, I think I heard this. I can't remember. It was the Bull. It was something about the Chicago Bulls. I remember when they were in their heyday. The sign of a champion, the mentality of a championship team, organization, program, whatever, is that they love to go on the road and shove it in the other fan's face or their rival's face. They relish in the opportunity to just make somebody else's day a nightmare, like you enjoy, as much as you want to have that home field advantage. We've seen what it's meant for SDSU, but what's honestly, how memorable are those Dakota Marker wins in Fargo? Are they maybe a little more memorable than even the ones at home? That 20, I mean, I'd say maybe the 2007 one. I mean, what are the most memorable Dakota Marker wins? Probably 2004, 2007. But then I would say probably 2016 with Jake Winicky, and then 2022, where they came. There is nothing that says you are a championship program more than your ability to go on the road and win tough ball games. That shows your toughness. That shows your focus. Shows your ability to come together, and they have none of it. They can't even win. They don't even win tough road games. They lose to god-awful teams on the road, where you have to, it's the old cliche of we have to get our own energy. You can't even do that. You can't beat Indiana State. You can't beat teams that are, when your season depends on it, you can't beat them. Oh, great, but we can come home and be dominant at the tinfoil shack of the Alerus Center. Great. Like I said, they could easily come back and win these next two games. I'm not doubting that. I don't want to make this sound like, SDSU is just going to go kill them the next 2 weeks. SDSU is going to kill them. USD is going to kill them. I think that could happen too, quite frankly. But my God, it's just such a weak-minded program. There is no toughness. If you can't go outside your little dome, center, whatever, it's better than it was under the previous coach. I'll give it that much credit. Because my God, it was just basically a really bad West Coast Big Sky team under the previous coach. So, that's not saying much. I mean, I'm just, so into my rant there, I guess. Yeah, wedding venue, good one. The Alerus Center is I mean, again, I'm not a big fan of indoor facilities for football. That's why, I know people love to rag on the Dakota Dome here. I don't have anything against the Dakota Dome. I would just rather have football outdoors. That extends to the NFL to me. That extends to college football. I get that the weather here is cold, but boy, I look at those old vintage 90s and 80s videos when the Bison and formerly Fighting Sioux were playing at Dakota Field and Memorial Field. And I get that it was like 20 below, but damn, that looked fun. Those stadiums looked fun. Even the old video I saw of the field that USD used to play at in Vermillion looked pretty nice, So, I just prefer outdoor facilities, and the Alerus Center, as much as the Fargo Dome has some quirks, just Alerus has always been a bit of a weird. Yeah, the weird thing about the Alerus Center is it has like this layer of tinfoil or something that's just kind of weird that I've never. It's got a very weird. I don't know. It does have a convention center feel, more of a convention center feel than the Fargo Dome does to it.
It's a weird vibe because it's so bright in there compared to most domes. Like most domes are kind of dark and dingy. You think of the UNI Dome, the Dakota Dome, the Fargo Dome, they're all dark in the stands.
And for the record, neither of them are domes.
Right, technically speaking. Yeah.
At least the Alaris
Yeah.
Center has the right name. It's not the Fargo Dome is not a dome. It would be called the Fargo Center if you wanted to. The Alaris Center at least knows that it's not a dome, so I will give them that over their brethren to the south. But yeah, Fargo Dome has more like an airplane hangar. But I mean, they both kind of feel like air. I don't know. They're indoor. I don't know. UND is just. But yeah, I don't see how they're going to get out of the Bubba deal. I mean, I think they extended him for what, 3 years? It's not a super long-term deal, but when you just extended him, this is not, as you said, this is not the FBS, and they have a hockey program to boot. I don't know where you're getting the money from.
Extremely high-end hockey program.
Yep.
And the Engelstads, they're hockey. They're not buying out your football coach's contract, I don't think.
Yep, nobody beats the Kibby Dome.
Yep.
The Kibbles and Bits Dome.
I'm telling you, there's one that beats it, but it's a D2 dome. It is the Superior Dome. It's also called the Uper Dome. It is the largest wooden dome in North America, and it's an actual geodesic dome. And it is sick. It's super cool inside. But now that we're off track, I think he's signed through 2027. I saw somebody say 2026 on here, but I think it's 2027, which would make sense or maybe it is 2026.
I need to check this out, JD.
The first year without him. But
I do need to check this out with JD because he's asking me if there were 3 Valley teams, and I believe that is correct. I believe there were only 3 Valley teams that made the playoff in 2022 because it was SDSU, NDSU. I believe UND made it.
Yes,
okay,
I think it was UND, and yeah, that was the
playoff bracket.
And
I mean, obviously,
that was the All Valley final again, the marker game repeat that year. And I could see it happening. I mean, god dang, it's not like Illinois State was dominant today. They only win by a touchdown at Youngstown, who granted is a little bit Eastern Washington-esque where they're playing better. Actually, those two are very eerily similar. They've gotten blown out in some games, look garbage, lost to a really, really bad yeesh game, Drake and Duquesne, but seem to be playing better of late, but is not totally turning itself into results.
Look at Illinois State's schedule. I need to look back. I think if Illinois, because they lost their leading rusher for the season, and he was genuinely good. I mean, he would have maybe been an all-conference runner if he hadn't. I mean, I think he went down to a season-ending injury right before they played NDSU. I guess it's going to depend on do they what are their wins during the season? I mean, they're 6-3.
They beat nobody.
They wrap up at Indiana State, at Northern Iowa, at Indiana State, and home for North Dakota. Gets to my point of even if UND sweeps SDSU and USD at home, which I think we believe is unlikely, UND will crap the bed at Illinois State, and
right.
Yeah, I mean, well, of course, we all can't forget that Illinois State gave up the 40 to Bagel against Iowa earlier this year. Got the nice win over Western Illinois.
Yeah, I mean, it's a pretty hollow.
Yeah, there's really
schedule.
They swept the directional Illinois. I mean, they took care of Eastern Illinois, Western Illinois, Southern Illinois. So
they're the Illinois champions, and that's not a great title this year.
Their only chances to make a statement were against North Dakota State and Missouri State, and they got blown out in both. And both were home games. I mean, if you want to make an argument about, well, they just lost their leading rusher against North Dakota State, okay, but then 2 weeks later, after they've had some time to adjust to that, they get whipped 41-7 at home by Missouri State. So, I mean, those are your 2 best teams, and now UND could, but by the time they get UND's either, maybe UND still has a shot, but UND has to sweep. There's no alternative. They have to beat SDSU and USD or they're done. So by the time you get them, that may not be that could have been a ranked win had they beaten Indiana State. and they beaten Indiana State and split with SDSU and USD. But now that could be completely meaningless. So, but we'll see. I mean, look at the Rhode Island schedule. I'll have to look at the Rhode Island.
Oh yeah,
I don't do too much. I don't do too much. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, a lot of those East Coast schedules are garbage. I mean, the CAA is not what it was either.
The CAA is a joke right now.
To put it mildly. I mean, it could. I mean, we'll see.
I'll say this. I will say this and Kevin's just gonna have a wet dream. He's gonna be stoked. The SoCon absolutely is better than the CAA right now, and the CAA will probably get more teams in off of their just overinflated number of teams they have, and that will be criminal. Western Carolina upset, or not necessarily upsets. I wouldn't necessarily call it an upset personally, but they beat Chattanooga, so now it's up in the air if you end up with 3 teams. Chattanooga does have to play the Citadel, who has been playing well, very well could get upset there. Western Carolina has to play East Tennessee State. And if they lose to East Tennessee State, and Chatty loses to the Citadel, now you're looking at a real possibility that you only have 2 teams getting to 8 wins in a 12-team season, and you end up with 2 bids when I think they have 4 teams who should be playoff caliber.
I do think Patrick brought up a good point about what if UND beats USD in Grand Forks. And again, I think
yes,
USD and SDSU are going to win both these games. I just do. I think UND, I get that they play better at the Alara Center, but this is a pretty one-dimensional team. Their quarterback he's throwing a little more than he did earlier, but there's a good point there. And I think that illustrates why USD really needs some wins in these last couple of games, because the fact they lost that game, granted Portland State was not a great team, but they are sitting there with a Division II win, and they lost a game that was out of their control. I mean, they're going to make the playoffs one way or the other, but if they were to lose to UND and NDSU, that drops them out of the seat. That drops them out of the top 8 seed. So they have to win. They have to win at least 2 of the 3. They have to win 2 of the 3. If they lose to NDSU, but if they lose to NDSU, now they have one. The one ranked win they have was Southern Illinois, who was ranked at the time. I think that does count, even though I think they count when they were ranked at the time, even if they fall off. So that will benefit them. I think if they lose to NDSU, but win their last 2 out of 3, I think they'll still get like a 7 or an 8. But yeah, I mean, you can make the argument, or it's even a 6, I think, because I just don't know that the rest of the top 8's that strong. But you can definitely make an argument they don't have a huge quality win if they don't beat NDSU, even if they played both NDSU and SDSU close. But yeah, if
they have no quality wins,
if they don't beat NDSU, if they don't have but I think the eye test, especially after the SDSU game, and if they play NDSU well in a loss, I think you can at least go on the eye test and say,
true. If they lose 2 of their final 3, they've only got 6 D1 wins. That's
but I think they'll still be in the playoffs, but it'll cost them a seed. I think a top seed. It costs them a bye at the worst. But
I mean, you're dropping down into the teens. There's no justification to rank them besides losing close.
I think everybody gets ranked because they do
the top 16. They do the top 16, and boy, I mean, if I'm any other team, if I'm not a South Dakota team, if I'm not South Dakota based or a Missouri Valley fan, and say let's just for argument's sake, we'll say I'm Western Carolina, and Western Carolina makes playoffs at 8-4. Are you really going to put and you have wins over who's Western Carolina beaten here? They've got a close loss at Montana, a close loss to Mercer, a win over Chattanooga, which is a good win, and then they would end with a win over ETSU as well, which is a good win. So you'd have 2 good wins. You'd have 2 more FCS wins in general. than what USD has. If I was a Chatty fan, for instance, and then USD got a higher seed than us because they lost close to the Dakota States, I would be really pissed off if I was one of them. And this isn't me trying to be a dink to USD.
I know. Well, but
I
then there's
think they
also
would still be in
the
the
idea that
13, 14 range.
there's also the idea too that, well, do you punish them because they had a game canceled? I mean, again, we know
Right.
Portland State would not. We know Portland State was not a great team, is not a great team, but it still would have been a Division I win on their resume and a road win. So I don't know that. And the flip side of that is, and of course, the other scenario I'm sure everybody kind of wants to see around here, if they were to beat NDSU, and you have the scenario where between the 3 Dakota schools, everybody goes 1-1-1 against everybody. How's it going to play out in the seeding? Unfortunately, because SDSU and USD played Division II teams, you're still going to see NDSU probably get the higher seed if they all split the Valley Championship. Because, unfortunately, like I said, again, one team did not play Division II school. That's just, some of these things are, and I still don't blame either SDSU or USD for playing a Division II school. I mean, it's tough to get Division I schools to come up here. I'd love to see some of those Lord knows we chirp enough with the SoCon people. I'd love to see them come up here. And I don't know why they can't. I don't know what the deal is there. Why we can't see a Western. It was fun having Incarnate Word up here. I know they're not SoCon, but we saw Western Carolina come up here. I don't know if that's a guarantee thing to where SDSU and USD aren't paying them enough to come up here, or they don't give them a return game. I don't know how that works, but yeah, I mean, certainly that is a downside when you schedule a D2 game. If you're a bubble team, it hurts you a lot, but if you're in seeding, it's gonna be a knock on you. I know they say it's not supposed to be, but we know it is. So like I said, there's a lot of interesting permutation. USD is gonna have like we said, USD is gonna have a big say in this, either if they lose or if they win, because it's gonna. And obviously, I mean, and let's not forget another team that's going to be a fly in the ointment from the Valley side of this is Missouri State, and they're not even eligible because they're going up to FBS. They go to NDSU. They go to NDSU in their second to last game. Now, they really haven't played. I mean, obviously, they played really well at Montana. Probably should have won that game early in the season. I don't know that they've necessarily played anybody high caliber since then. I mean, almost won at Ball State, which is not a good FBS team. Kind of played Lindenwood close, who hasn't been a great one. I mean, yes. I mean, we haven't really seen how good Missouri State is. We'll get a better gauge of that in those final 2 games. But all they have to play for is to try and win a conference title. And they've said that. They're going to get their shot. I mean, assuming they don't. I'm assuming they will not crap the bed next week when they go to Murray State. So they are going to be undefeated when they go to Fargo in 2 weeks. And then their final game as an FCS team is against South Dakota State at the same time that USD is playing NDSU. So the Valley Championship is going to be up for could very well be up for grabs on that final day. The seeding, everything. I mean, it's going to be a lot's going to be determined in those final 2 weeks, 3 weeks. Well, to be honest.
A lot of people have been asking this question. JD Dorman's, I think, said it a couple times now, so I'm going to address it here. But first, I want to address. Zach says, to be fair, a lot of those schools down here aren't flagship state schools. They'd rather save money by playing local out of conference games than paying to fly to North Dakota or the West Coast,
and playing the big FBS schools.
I understand. Even JMU did that. They didn't play like a lot of way out there games. I do think more of it is a mentality thing than anything on the East Coast, and in that region, they like to stay in that region. That's okay. That is what it is. But you also pay the price sometimes when it comes to playoff seeding and whatnot. But
like I said, I just found it interesting this year that you have West Carolina going to Montana. Obviously, NDSU is going to have a return series with East. They play East Tennessee in Johnson City this year. I think that game returns. Either that was a return or they play them in Fargo again. I know that. So I don't expect it every year, but it would have been nice. It'd be nice to see them come up like once every 5 years. So I don't, like I said, I don't expect to see it every year, but it'd be nice to see Furman make their way up here once every 5 or 6 years, something like that, just to spice things up a little bit. But again, scheduling is a weird deal. I don't, especially at the FCS level, because like I said, it surprised me to see a team like Western Carolina. Having worked in Missoula, it's a lot tougher to fly into Missoula, Montana, I think, than to get to Sioux Falls, than to get to Brookings. Like, you could practically, you fly into Sioux Falls or Omaha or Minneapolis and get to Sioux Falls pretty easily. It's kind of tough to get to Missoula. I know from living there, it's kind of tough to get to Missoula. I can't imagine it's any more or less expensive to get to a game in Brookings or Vermilion than it is in Missoula. So, but I could be wrong there. I'm just speaking off the top of my head with that. So don't, yeah, I mean, yeah, and NDSU is going to national next year. That game's going to be at the Titans. I know the Titans are moving to a new stadium, but that's going to be at the Titans Stadium.
so
yeah, I mean,
JD Dorman,
I'd love to see SDSU. Go ahead.
Yeah, and I think we can get into that more too when we talk about what's going on with the Ivies. I just wanted to drill down on this because this is a brutal thing to try to do. But if USD does beat NDSU close, how do you seed SDSU, NDSU, and USD? Then you're working off the assumption when you ask that question, obviously, that all three teams win out. If you win out, this is unfair, but probably the most fair. But I see two scenarios. Like Zach on the Blue Bloods has talked about it before. There's two ways it works. Either you just take the three of them, put them up on the board, and you go, all right, NDSU. I think they'd finish with like 5 ranked wins on their schedule because a lot of their out of conference games have really turned out into aces for him with ETSU and whatever. And then SDSU would have probably, depending on what happens with UND and ranking, you'd probably have 4. And then USD would have 2, right? So if you go off resume and, all things being essentially equal, that the home team in that triangle won every game close. So you're kind of acknowledging they're pretty well equal. So we're going to go off of their results. You would have NDSU and then SDSU and then USD. However, there's something internally with me that I loathe that, just because all that's doing for USD is probably making them the 4 seed in that scenario, right? And that just it's almost like you're saying the only thing that game that you just played and won against the number 1 team in the country was worth was you being a 4 seed instead of a probably, I don't know, 6 or 7 seed, which sucks. So there's and then there's always recency bias all the time, especially at the end of the year, last game of the year, where people could be like, well, you have to have USD over NDSU because they beat them, which in that scenario, SDSU fans at first blush will be pissed because we probably end up with the 4 seed in that scenario. You would give USD the 2 seed and NDSU the 3 seed if that's the way they decide to look at it. But in the end, I think it would actually turn out okay if you're an SDSU fan, because as of right now, every bracket I've seen drawn up and everything, the 1 seed side of the bracket is way easier looking than the 2 side of the bracket. But that's just personally how I see it. It'd be one of those 2 scenarios. It just depend on how the committee looks at it. And keep in mind, I know you can't talk about your own team or whatever, but you'll never convince me that in a real world where people are humans, that having the NDSU AD on the as the chair of the committee, has zero influence. I'm not stupid enough to believe that. I will not. You can't. You're spitting on my head and telling me it's raining if you're telling me they have no influence on what happens when they're not in the room when they're talking about our team. Oh yeah, and there's no way that they would ever talk about it otherwise. Like, come on, let's be serious a little bit here. I agree that there's an effort put in to negate favoritism based off of who's on there, and I believe it is an honest effort. But I also believe it still has an impact. So I would probably lean that it would go with NDSU as the 2, SDSU in the 3, and USD as the 4. And USD fans are just gonna have a conniption about it. But that is just my personal opinion on how that would shake out. I'm curious how you see it.
I tend to agree. I think the only way there's a significant deviation, I mean, the other interesting fly in the ointment would be, what if Davis beats Montana State? I mean, because I think right now the committee said NDSU was the number 1 seed.
Yes.
So, I mean, could you like I said, if Davis beats Montana State, then this really gets interesting. Or if Montana, let's say Montana State beats Davis, but somehow, which is, I mean, we don't think it's going to happen. What if Montana beats Montana State? Because those things happen in rivalry games. They do. I don't expect it. So there's a lot of things that could, I don't for the life of me think the committee, if that happened, actually put Valley teams 1 and 2. I don't know, but they might have to. I don't know. That would be an interest. Now, if Davis wins, then I think they move in. Even then, I don't know if
Davis would get the 2 seed.
But I still don't. I mean,
they'd be undefeated against the FCS, and they'd have a win over
undefeated against the FCS. But then you have also Montana State saying they have an FBS win, even though it's a shitty team they beat.
Yep.
That gets really interesting. But then, like I said, if Montana State were to beat Davis, but then lose to Montana, then you almost have. Do you put Mercer? Is Mercer going? I don't know if you can put Mercer as a top 2 seed. I don't think so. Or, I mean, I don't think the committee would want to put NDSU, USD, or NDSU, SDSU as 1 and 2, but you would almost have to if that happens, I think. So I kind of agree. I think if it goes that way, I think the only other way it would deviate would be if USD somehow just blew NDSU, if they blew the doors off NDSU, which I don't expect to happen. If they win that game in Vermillion, I think it's going to be a good, close, another knock them down, another physical game. But I think maybe the other factor would be, and I don't know how much they do of this because we've seen weird things before. Let's say they beat the Bison and Cam Miller suffers a really bad injury that's going to knock him out of the playoffs. Then do they maybe say, okay, did they look at the state of the Bison there and say, okay, we don't necessarily want to seed this team number, make them the higher seed because they're not the same team anymore. I mean, that would be the only significant way I would say that something deviates for any of these teams if it goes that way. If USD defeats NDSU, and the same could happen to SDSU or USD. If Gronowski or Bauman gets hurt and is going to miss significant time or misses the playoffs, does the committee then say, okay, I know you had a great season, but you just lost your starting quarterback. We don't think you're the same team, so we're not going to give you the same seed. I think that could be in play. And to be clear, you hope that's a worst case. You hope that doesn't happen. But yeah, otherwise I kind of agree. I just think, again, USD, they're hurt by this is where, again, that Portland State would not have been a great resume builder, but it hurts not to have that win on not to have that extra Division I win, and they just don't have. I mean, obviously SDSU had helped them to have Incarnate Word turned out to have a pretty good year, unless they were ranked pretty highly at the time. Certainly, if USD makes that field goal, this is a different. I don't know if I mentioned this in our post game, but I thought last week. But I thought one of the dumbest things USD did last week, right before they missed the field goal at the end of the regulation, was that quarterback. I know they have their backup quarterback. He mainly comes in on those running plays, but when he lost that yardage and set that field goal back farther, I was thinking to myself, my God, that along with the halfback pass with Tice that got picked off. I'm like, those were the two galaxy brain moves that I thought probably cost USD that game. Obviously, it didn't necessarily hurt him as bad with the Tice play because then they returned the fumble. But if he makes that field goal, this is a different conversation for USD. I mean, it's a different conversation for SDSU, but then they've got their quality win. If they beat NDSU, it's a very quality win, but you're still trailing NDSU. You're still trailing SDSU, who's got the win over you, the win over Incarnate Word. NDSU just has more, and their loss to Colorado. If we're comparing all three, their loss in non-conference FBS to Colorado looks better because Oklahoma State has been nobody expected Oklahoma State to completely fall apart.
Well, the claim forever has been FBS losses are not counted when it comes to any of this. So if you're doing it, then that is a fundamental change to how the playoff seeds are decided.
I understand
that. You are literally changing the entire basis. I mean, that is a massive.
I kind of take it along the lines of what you said with Matt Larson, the NDSU athletic director, being on the committee. You can't tell me it doesn't have some influence. A couple years ago when Montana State, I think it was when Sacramento State in 2022, I think they were unbeaten, and they had an FBS win over my alma mater, Colorado State, who was a god-awful FBS team. But you had SDSU, who was unbeaten in the FBS and had a close loss against a good Big Ten team in Iowa. SDSU got the number 1 seed. I mean, you can't. I realize it's not supposed to be, but I think in that situation where if we get to that point where they're comparing these three teams that are 1-1-1 against each other, and you can't really use the head-to-heads because they've all, because again, it kind of cancels each other out. I think they're going to kind of look and say, okay, they all played these FBS teams, and NDSU's was the closest, and they also played the best one of the three FBS teams. Wisconsin is probably the second best, and Oklahoma State ended up just kind of, I don't know. I'm disappointed in Oklahoma State. I'll put it like that. But it's just one of those things where I realize that's not, supposed to be, but you can't tell me based on some past experiences. I think even the Division, technically even the Division II thing. I think the fact that they play Division II games, as we've since been told, is not supposed to be a factor. But you can't tell me it's not.
Well, they said matter. Now it sort of counts if it's close, which was a weird thing when they did that. And the reality is what it comes down to is every committee is different and values different things more, or they come out with the bracket that they think is best and then use the tools that they're given to justify it. It does feel like, there's definitely, from when you have different groups of people, that rotate, they're going to have things they value differently when it comes to deciding these things. And it changes year to year. More like, groupings of yearings is what it feels like. Sometimes groupings of years. It's late. But groupings of years where they will, value things more. There was years I remember where the quality loss thing was thrown around, and that will be, I promise you, thrown out if USD loses to NDSU close as well. The quality loss thing will absolutely be used as justification for why they're over somebody or not. But yeah, it's only 11:36 for you, Brian. It's been a long one today.
Well, there wasn't that much to talk about with the. It was a long, if you were out in the tailgating lots,
well, lots
yeah,
of cooking the food the night before, and yeah. But one other thing I wanted to get to is the Ivies have come out,
point.
and it's not the Ivy League schools. I believe it's their Student Athletes Association or whatever has put forward a motion for the presidents to consider allowing them to participate in the playoffs. And one thing, before we get too excited and in dallying about the how fun the potential of the Ivies joining the playoffs and what a big deal it could be for the FCS is, I want to be very clear. You need every Ivy League president to vote for this to happen. And Yale and Harvard love their game being played the weekend it is, in the tradition that comes along with it. And boy, getting them to move off of that feels like it's a tough ask. I think this might have happened before, or at least there's been chatter prior of this being a thing, and every time it gets shot down. And but it is going to the presidents to consider and talk about potentially participating in the playoffs. And the thing that's curious to me is I think Dartmouth is leading the Ivy and looks like they're going to win the Ivy this year. So hypothetically, the Yale Harvard game wouldn't matter when it comes to accepting a bid. And I think the way it works is they get offered a bid every year, no matter what, and they just turn it down, is how it works, because they have to be offered a bid and then they make the decision to turn it down. Same thing with the SWAC and MEAC, because they have the Celebration Bowl. So there is the potential, like if Dartmouth wins the Ivy, that they accept it, and all of a sudden we've got an Ivy League team in the playoffs. And that would be, holy, what a wrench that would throw into the thing. Like, oh my God, we've got an extra auto bid all of a sudden. What the hell is going on? Oh, Harvard beat Dartmouth today. See, I don't watch there's one set of scores I don't watch. And
I can't remember. Are they scholars? Are they scholarshiped? Or
they are not. They are not scholarship. I believe
I think they're pretty good. I don't think this is like Pioneer League. I don't think this is like the Pioneer League, though. I think they have some pretty high quality dudes.
They have dudes. They send dudes.
This is not like Pioneer League. This is not like Pioneer League where your St. Thomas is going to get murdered by USF. This is pretty.
What do you mean they can't accept it, Brian? I don't understand. Is non-athletic? That doesn't. Oh, I don't understand what your comments are saying there, Brian.
I'm guessing right now maybe they can't accept it because they're in unison, or maybe it's solidarity.
Maybe that happens at the beginning of the year and they've told them they're going to deny it. I guess that's plot. Me throwing that out there is kind of just being a goober. I don't think that happens, but
it would.
Harvard Yale's already moved. It's played November 23rd, so that's not an issue either. Yeah, they get academic money. I think that's what he's talking about. That's what they get equivalent of FBS level rides with the academic money. I'd
love to see dudes on conference games. God, I mean, some of the venues they play in are like some of the birthplace venues of college football. I mean,
they are.
I mean, God, those would be unbelievable.
People bemoan the watering down of the FCS constantly, and I don't think that's necessarily true at the top. I think it's true in the middle more so than anything. But you want to instantly bring in a set of schools that competing for the championship that have the potential to instantly fill out the FCS and bring it back per se, and adding the East Coast back into mattering for the FCS. You have the Ivy Leagues. I mean, they've got more money than God, and if they decide they want to compete, they will compete. I mean, they've got money and they can put up facilities or have facilities.
The other half of it is, though, they tend not to care that much about some of their athletics, much less FCS football. I don't know if they, I don't, but yeah, you're right. I mean,
they have, they compete really well. They've basketball. They've had runs. In hockey, they have runs. Wrestling, they've got really standout wrestling teams. I mean, Damian Hahn came from Cornell, which is a standout wrestling program. I mean, they are capable of having programs, and it would be, God, it'd just be fun. I mean, imagine Princeton coming to Brookings, in December, or, and I do think, like you said, that would entice eventually them to have extra out of conference, and maybe they challenge themselves more out of conference going forwards outside of the region to become more competitive. And there's just a lot of fun possibilities there. And I think that's part of why that, people don't say that hate the Ivy Leagues and won't rank them and everything like that. Part of why they have such disdain for them is they know how cool it would be if they did participate. And there's, like Kevin says, they don't want to play with the the unwashed masses, and there is the incredible arrogance about the way they go about their business in FCS football, and I completely agree with. But man, it would be so fun. The potential there is just so tantalizing, and I think that's what makes me so angry when they don't, because that'd be so fun.
Between the guy who said F the nerds and then
right?
I think we're about ready to wrap it up, because I don't know how we top these last few comments. No, it's tantalizing. And the FCS, I mean, just for quality's sake too, I think it definitely needs it. Certainly a reinvigoration. And
I want to point out something it just specifically, Zach, here. There is do NDSU and SDSU invest in their programs? Absolutely. Is it I'll have to go back and look through again, but is it some egregious amount above? You got to remember the amount of investment that is in those schools that is funded by the fan base. It's not there, it feels like the resources bit is propped up like the state of North Dakota and the state of South Dakota, and the fact that these are the flagship schools, so they're getting all these public resources funneled into them to make these programs. It's just not true. I mean, SDSU is the highest of those two schools at 40% ish. I believe if you go Knight Newhouse data, SDSU is around 40% of their athletic budget is from school subsidies and government money, whereas NDSU is all the way down in the 30%. They get their money from their fan base. It's not, and you can argue that, well, they get their money from their fan base and they have the fan base because they are the state school. That's a fine argument to make. But like JMU has shown, if a school decides they really want to invest in their program, there's ways to do that. I mean, App State, Georgia Southern, there's a lot of schools in the Southwest that have shown that it can be done. Now, do I know it can happen now? I think it is tougher to be in those regions transfer portal wise, but you also get the give of the transfer portal as well that you can make work for you. I mean, Incarnate Word has been showing, knock on their resume all you want and everything, and I get that, but you look over the last 3-4 years, I mean, they've shown that you can make the transfer portal work for you as well and consistently win that way. Not necessarily a national title, but you can consistently win. But anyways, that was way off topic. We are late. We should probably wrap it up here. I'm just babbling and rambling at this point.
Not going to spend too much because we are going to wrap up here, but Jason Hepler not real good right now.
It's over.
There's going to take
done.
a lot. It'll take a lot of no's, I think, for them to come to the Dakotas, at least until there's a Division I split. We've been on that. We've been on the expansion train for a while. So do not think the Mountain West is coming out here. Besides which, Colorado State's dominating that right now. We're 6-3, and we haven't lost. Of course, we haven't played anybody either. So I kind of think it's a bit of a fraudulent 6-3, and I'm not.
You're the Missouri State of the Mountain West right now.
Apparently, because we're moving up to the Pac-12, so whatever. And there's
remember that
rant I went on. You remember that rant I went on a few weeks ago about the rewards of being in the FBS? Well, we're going to go probably. I mean, I know they won tonight pretty easily. Boise State should kick our ass when we get I think we're on pace to go, because we should kill Wyoming next week, because Wyoming's god awful this year without bowl. If we don't, then this was fraudulent. But that rant I went on a few weeks ago about the glories of the FBS and winning 6 or 7 games and going to shitty bowls. That's going to be us if we win 8 or 9 games, then get curb stomped by Boise, and we're out in the Potato Bowl. So there you go, Dom Izzo and Mike McFeely. We've got a coach that I'm still not sure has got us going in the right direction. We might win 8-9 games, 7-8-9 games, and I still don't know if this coach should be the guy going forward. And we're going to go to probably a crappy bowl game, and that's a success. So, and I'm still not excited about the direction of this program. I'm not excited about what could be a 7-9 win season that's going to end in a bowl game I've never heard of. It's better than being 3-8, but I'd rather be in a division where I could go to a playoff.
Yeah.
God. So there's your there's your FBS.
Here's my walk-off. Here's my walk-off thing that just got retweeted by Kevin, FCS Nation Radio on Twitter. Portland State football, after beating Sac State, their official account said, "How's that Pac-12 application going?"
That almost makes me forgive you for the whooping cough bit, guys. Almost.
That's pretty great. So
that is good. Oh, yep. We'll call it a night here, guys. Thanks for joining us. Good week ahead. It's going to start be a little more interesting next week. SDSU heads to UND. USD gets a pretty cakewalk game, we think, with Indiana State at home. By the way, if you're in Sioux Falls and if you're not watching the Jacks game at a party, by the way, if you want a good small school game next week, go to Augustana. Kirkby over. USF and Augie is going to be the key to the city game. Is always fun. They're 1-2 in the NSIC this year, man. That game is going to be if you can get a ticket to that, or even just watch from the fence where they have the clear fence. Have the SDSU game on your phone, and I'm encouraging anybody, if you want to see just a fun small school game next week, that place they're gonna be hanging from the street for that one. So go watch that game next week. That'll be a lot of fun. If you can get over your Augie, hate from the D2 days, and of course, if you can get out to Sioux Falls Monday night, Jackrabbits the men's team has their opener at the Pentagon with McNeese State. That's going to be an interesting game. We don't know what the men's team. We don't really know what they're going to look like this year. They lost. Thank you, transfer portal, and then the first home games at the new arena, first official ones, will be, unfortunately, on a Friday night, which will be rather busy with high school football semifinals. So we won't have many highlights of that, which I hate, because that's a really good doubleheader they're going to have on Friday night. Creighton with the women. That's a great doubleheader. And then Long Beach State. Those are, one's a major program, and then the other's a pretty good mid-major. So if you're not going to a high school football game, get out and enjoy some basketball. And that volleyball team is 22-0. They won again today.
Yes.
They might be ranked. I'm dead serious. Like, I know the Summit League isn't great, but at some point they're probably going to have to get ranked if they keep winning. The only game that's probably they could lose that's left on their regular season schedule is probably at USD here in a few weeks. I think it's a week from Tuesday they play at USD. I think they've got, as we wrap this up here, I promise we'll wrap it up here. I think they've got a couple more home games this week, actually. I'll just look at that really quick because I'm on their schedule. Yeah, they swept Kansas City today. They're now 22-0. Yep, they'll be home this week. They will host St. Thomas at 7 o'clock on Thursday. They will host North Dakota State at 1 o'clock on Saturday. Their final home match is Thursday, a week from Thursday, against Oral Roberts, and then they wrap up at UND on November 16th. And then, like I said, the one match that, I mean, they could conceivably run the table. The one match that I really could see them maybe losing at this point is probably their season finale at USD on November 19th. And of course, that's the only match that they've gone 5 sets against anybody in conference with. So, get out there and watch the volleyball team as well, because that's this is pretty remarkable stuff, and they could well be ranked pretty soon.
Yes, sir. Hell of a season for the ladies there. What a turnaround. And with that, we are out. Thanks for joining us, all you crazy degenerates, and you guys have a good weekend. And like Blazer Bobcat told us, set your clock, fall back, get that extra sleep. So
peace.